How does a tiny Mediterranean peninsula birth an unparalleled global empire and then go on to continuously shape Western civilization for over 3,000 years? Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a truly cinematic, sweeping historical narrative. We're talking monumental triumphs, devastating collapses, and absolutely miraculous rebirths.
We're going to trace the epic history of Italy, from the ancient, unstoppable legions of Caesar right through to the artistic genius of Michelangelo. From the passionate, bloody fight for a unified nation into the dark ashes of world wars, and finally out the other side to the modern democratic republic we know today. It's a phenomenal story of resilience.
Okay, let's dive into this. We'll be hitting 6 massive eras today. The rise of the Roman Empire, the fall and medieval fragmentation, the brilliance of the Renaissance, the unification or risorgimento, fascism and the world wars, and finally, the modern Italian Republic.
Section 1. Rise of the Roman Empire, from city-state to global power.
So, our story begins with just a small farming community on the banks of the Tiber River. Now, legend says Rome was founded in 753 BCE by the twin brothers Romulus and Remus, but historically speaking, it was actually a mix of Latin tribes who absorbed a lot of influence from their neighbors, like the Etruscans and Greeks. Fast forward to 509 BCE, and they kick out their last king, establishing the Roman Republic. This was a completely revolutionary system with elected consuls in the Senate. Through incredible adaptability and sheer military conquest, especially those pivotal Punic Wars against Carthage between 264 and 146 BCE, Rome literally conquered the Mediterranean. Finally, after some pretty grueling civil wars, the Republic collapsed, and in 31 BCE, Augustus stepped up as the very first Roman emperor, kicking off the Pax Romana.
But here's the thing. Rome wasn't just built on military might. It was built on unparalleled engineering, specifically their absolute mastery of aqueducts. I mean, to sustain a capital city of nearly 1 million people back then, you had to innovate. They sourced water using constructed basins, controlling its speed and inertia with these massive raised tanks. Then they used arches and siphons to cross really steep, crazy terrain, sealing the whole shebang with highly improved concrete. And what's truly mind-blowing is that this 2,000-year-old blueprint still heavily influences modern water authorities today. We're talking systems like the Catskill Aqueduct in New York City or the major water networks in Los Angeles.
Section 2. Fall and medieval fragmentation, the Dark Ages.
Of course, no empire lasts forever, right? In 476 CE, the last Western Roman emperor was deposed, completely shattering this myth of Roman invincibility. Historians have argued about the exact causes for centuries, but it really boils down to a fatal mix of internal decay and external pressure. Internally, the empire had just gotten too huge. Splitting it into East and West drained revenue from Rome, leading to massive government instability, unemployment, and overcrowding. Then, externally, this vulnerable, financially starved Western half just couldn't pay for an army big enough to hold back the continuous waves of Germanic and barbarian tribes. That constant warfare disrupted trade, destroyed crops, and ultimately brought the eternal city to its knees.
The aftermath of this collapse left the Italian peninsula totally transformed. Successive invasions by groups like the Ostrogoths, Byzantines, and Lombards left the region heavily depopulated and poor. But, nature abhors a vacuum. The Catholic Church, led by folks like Pope Gregory the Great, stepped right into that power vacuum to provide some stability, eventually establishing the Papal States as a major political heavyweight. At the exact same time, as we moved through the medieval centuries, northern Italy saw the rise of these fiercely independent communes and maritime republics, places like Venice, Genoa, and Florence. They piled up vast wealth through trade and really set the perfect stage for our next era.
Section 3. Brilliance of the Renaissance, rebirth of culture. So, out of the sheer devastation of the 14th century, which, let's not forget, included the horrific Black Death, emerged this breathtaking cultural revolution that fundamentally rewired European thought. Now, what's really interesting about this era is how a figure like Leonardo da Vinci perfectly captures its ideal. He wasn't just a painter, he was the ultimate Renaissance man, a universal thinker. Under the financial backing of super-wealthy families like the Medici in Florence, geniuses like Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael were basically given a blank check to excel across multiple disciplines at once, totally blurring the lines between art and science.
The ripple effects of this movement were just sweeping. After Constantinople fell, refugee Byzantine scholars brought these long-lost Greek classics back to Italy. Humanist scholars started digging through old monastic libraries, and boom, a massive intellectual revival caught fire. Society began rejecting rigid old-school scholasticism in favor of naturalism and humanism. In the arts, suddenly, you see this incredible mastery of perspective in human anatomy. And over in the sciences, figures like Galileo Galilei were literally laying the foundations for modern physics and astronomy. It was an absolute explosion of creativity that eventually spread across the entire continent.
Section 4. Unification and the Risorgimento, Forging a Nation.
Now, despite all that cultural brilliance, Italy actually remained a fractured collection of city-states and foreign-controlled territories for a long, long time. The Risorgimento, which was a 19th century nationalist movement literally meaning resurgence, sought to fix that and forge a single united nation. And it was not easy. It was a gradual, highly complex process of bloody revolts and incredibly shrewd politics. It kicked off after the 1815 Congress of Vienna, which put old pre-Napoleonic borders back in place and left a lot of Italy under foreign rule, especially Austrian. That sparked decades of unrest. By 1848, a massive wave of democratic uprisings swept through. They were initially crushed, sure, but they heavily empowered revolutionary groups. Then, through some truly brilliant diplomatic chess played by politicians like Camilla di Cavour, territorial gains were slowly clawed back. This led to the official proclamation of the Kingdom of Italy in 1861 and finally wrapped up in 1870 when Italian troops breached the walls of Rome, making it the unified capital.
But listen, you absolutely cannot talk about unification without talking about Giuseppe Garibaldi. Leading a fierce volunteer force known as the Red Shirts, Garibaldi waged this legendary, almost romantic military campaign that conquered Sicily and southern Italy, effectively stitching the north and the south together. At the peak of his glory, Garibaldi was hands down the most famous person in Italy, more famous than Cavour, Mazzini, or even the great composer Verdi. He became this massive international icon for national independence, getting praise from global heavyweights like Abraham Lincoln and Victor Hugo.
Section 5. Fascism and World Wars, a dark chapter.
So this newly unified nation steps onto the world stage, but it's facing immense challenges. Deep economic divides between the industrial North and the impoverished South, widespread illiteracy, it was the perfect storm for a deeply turbulent 20th century. To understand the political upheaval that followed, we really have to look at the immense toll of the world wars. Italy entered World War I in 1915. While they were ultimately victorious at Vittorio Veneto, the war was fought in brutal, freezing alpine conditions, at a staggering cost in human life and national treasury. The disappointment over what they actually gained at the peace conference led to what they called a mutilated victory, triggering severe economic chaos. 2 decades later, joining World War II in 1940 proved even more catastrophic. That period was characterized by severe military defeats, a brutal foreign occupation, and a devastating civil war that left the country both physically and morally shattered.
And nestled right between those two global conflicts was the rise of Benito Mussolini, capitalizing heavily on the social unrest and the political paralysis that followed World War I. Mussolini founded the fascist movement. In October 1922, his march on Rome brought him to power. Over the next few years, he systematically dismantled Italy's democratic institutions, establishing a totalitarian dictatorship. His regime pursued a highly aggressive, expansionist foreign policy, including the invasion of Ethiopia and, notably, an alliance with Nazi Germany. As the historical record shows, this trajectory ultimately led to utter disaster during World War II, culminating in his dismissal by the king in 1943 and the total collapse of his regime.
Section 6. The Modern Italian Republic, a post-war rebirth.
Emerging from the ashes of 1945, Italy faced a truly monumental task of reconstruction. So, the crucial point in this story of rebirth is the year 1946. On June 2nd of that year, the Italian people voted in a massive national referendum to permanently abolish the monarchy that had ruled since unification. In its place, they established a brand new, democratic republic backed by a strong constitution.
What happened next was, frankly, nothing short of astounding. Between 1958 and 1963, Italy experienced an economic miracle. In an incredibly short window of time, the nation transitioned from a mostly rural, agricultural society right into one of the top industrial powers on the planet. They became a founding member of the European Economic Community, integrating heavily into the global market. And beyond just industry, Italian creativity roared back onto the world stage. From iconic cinema directed by legends like Fellini and De Sica to leading the entire globe in automotive design, architecture, and high fashion. Italy proved, yet again, that its cultural influence was absolutely undeniable.
Which brings us to the present day, and to this final thought. We've seen a single peninsula rise to conquer the known world, shatter into 1,000 pieces, ignite the greatest artistic awakening in human history. fight bitterly to become a unified nation, plunge into the profound darkness of totalitarianism, and then miraculously rise once again as a modern democratic powerhouse. It's a 3,000-year cycle of incredible resilience, brilliant creativity, and constant reinvention. So, as Italy continues to navigate the complexities of the 21st century, you have to wonder, how will this ancient, enduring spirit continue to shape the future of our globalized world? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.